March 22nd, 2010. This is the Migration Policy Institute Speaker Series Leadership Visions, and today's guest is U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Director Alejandro Mayorkas, giving his vision for the future of his agency. Today's event is moderated by Doris Meissner, Senior Fellow and Director of the U.S. Immigration Policy Program at the Migration Policy Institute.
Director Mayorkas has a legal background and has spent a substantial time of his career in federal service, so he has a public service background. And in addition to that, a very compelling personal story and acquaintance with immigration. So it's a very good combination for this position. In addition to that, I think I would like to say at the outset, in starting this off, that as most of you know, the agency that he heads, the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, is quite a relatively new agency. It was created as part of the Department of Homeland Security with the breakup of the Immigration and Naturalization Service. I think it is fair to say that it has been less visible over the course of its young life than its counterpart agencies, ICE or CBP, and it is considerably smaller than those companion agencies, both in personnel and in resources. But it has a very large mission, and that is, of course, an essential mission because it is the mission of administering the nation's legal immigration system. So as such, Alejandro Mayorkas, Ali, is the steward of programs that really continue to represent enormous hope, aspiration, inspiration, idealism for millions around the world. In addition to that, if the day ever comes where we have substantial new legislation that is anywhere along the lines of the way in which comprehensive immigration reform has been described and is being talked about today, then that agency, USCIS, will actually take on and be charged with the central mandates of a new law. This is always, I think, slightly counterintuitive because we talk about the new law as a response to a dysfunctional system, which of course it certainly is, and as heavily involved with enforcement of one sort or another, which certainly is the case. But if you think about it, a number of the pillars of a new law, first of all, mandatory employer verification, would to a considerable extent be the next generation of one form or another of what is today E-Verify, which is administered at USCIS. The new law would most likely involve some form or another of future flows to meet labor force needs in this country, whether that be through temporary programs, through combination of temporary permanent programs, whether it is increased legal immigration for employment purposes, but any form of those kinds of future flows would in fact principally involve USCIS and the approval of petitions for those slots. And then finally, of course, the thing that we know well, if there is a legalization program of some kind, we would be talking about the possible conferring of legal status on 11 million. It would depend, of course, how it's written and what the numbers are at that time. But still, I think it's fair to say a larger caseload of adjudications than has ever been handled by the agency to date, on top of its ongoing caseload. So this is an extraordinarily important agency with varied missions that are incredibly important in their current formulation as well as in what the future might hold. Thus, it's critical that it be a strong and effective agency. So, Ali Mayorkas is here to that end. Exactly, okay. Let me take us to E-Verify because there's a recent event where E-Verify is concerned. the Westat evaluation.
Yes.
And so I'd like to give you an opportunity to talk about what the takeaways are from that evaluation. And then I want to go, and then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. But why don't you tell us what you, what the state of play is based on Westat?
Sure. When I first arrived at the agency in August of 2009, the resounding concerns that I had heard about E-Verify were the following: that the work authorized were receiving tentative non-confirmations at a rate that was untenable. And the Westat study that was published that captured data in the 2008, early 2009 timeframe speaks of the tremendous success of E-Verify in authorizing instantaneously new employees who are in fact work authorized. The accuracy rate in that category is above 99%. The concern has shifted now to E-Verify's ability to detect an individual who is not work authorized, the ability of Westat, the ability of E-Verify to detect that individual in the verification process. And the Westat study, the reports of the Westat study got the numerator right. They just didn't, I think, give appropriate deference to the denominator in the fraction. The reports indicated that E-Verify was able to identify, was not able to identify the unauthorized worker 54% of the time. What is very important to note is that the population of unauthorized workers that come through the E-Verify system is 6.2% of the entire employee workforce that is vetted through E-Verify. And so E-Verify, according to the Westat study, misses 54% of that 6.2% subset. And that's a much, much smaller community of people. And I would say two things about that. Number one, I think we can speak of the effectiveness of E-Verify in identifying that 6.2% denominator, because that to me speaks of a deterrent effect of the E-Verify system, number one. And number two, the Westat study did indeed identify challenges that E-Verify has in detecting identity fraud. And I will tell you, as a federal prosecutor that prosecuted identity fraud cases, not just in the immigration arena, but in many other areas, it is a crime that is difficult to address. And E-Verify is but one tool in our arsenal to address identity fraud. So I actually thought that the Westat study spoke of E-Verify's successes more so than it did underscore any particular challenge. It was a challenge of which we were aware.